On the agenda tonight, we're going to be having a listen to Michael Jackson and seeing how his voice changed as he aged by listening to him singing age 11 and then age 36. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. So this request was quite a specific one, and it's an interesting one because I've always thought that Michael Jackson's voice did change as he aged. So we're going to be looking at that under the spotlight with isolated vocals, but also we're going to be taking a look at his speaking voice for reference. First of all, we're just going to have a listen to Michael talking with Oprah Winfrey in an interview, and he's 35 years of age at this point. And I have put this through the pitch monitoring software so we can see where his voice sat when he was talking.
Wonderful thing in the world. Who wouldn't have wanted that life?
It is wonderful, and there is a lot of wonderment in being.
And just to point out that Oprah Winfrey, when she was talking, these are her vocal waves here, and Michael's are at the same pitch. So you would say that he had a lot higher voice than you would expect a guy to have. I mean, generally guys will be an octave below women, but here exactly the same. Let's listen a little bit more.
Famous. I mean, you travel the world and you see things, you meet people, you go places. It's great. But then there's the other side. There's which I'm not complaining. There's lots of rehearsal.
And here we can see that we hit a G-sharp 3 a couple of times in Michael's talking voice, and if we were relating this to our piano, obviously he's not singing, but the G is here, the G-sharp 3 is here, and you can see pretty much in the middle of the baritone range, getting towards the lower half of the tenor range, but he's just talking. So what we can take from this is that if I'm taking my voice and I'm taking this note that I'm saying here, this is where I talk. Now if I go up an octave, that is up an octave from my talking voice. And I can keep on going up from that point. So when Michael's talking on a G-sharp 3, if he takes that up an octave, which for most people and most guys, taking your voice up an octave is achievable. It's quite easy because you're starting from a low point anyway. That would be a G-sharp 4. And look at this, we're right at the top of the male tenor range. So when you listen to Michael sing and you think that his voice is really high, and people might be struggling to sing the same notes that Michael does, Michael's voice is probably an octave higher than yours naturally. So it means that you're effectively trying to sing 2 octaves higher than your natural speaking voice. So I know I mentioned this in the other video that Michael had this light head voice quality to his talking voice, and he could take his voice a lot lower, but he didn't speak there. So he was using his vocal cords in this configuration around this G-sharp 3 all the time. His voice, when he starts to push it, he could get really high notes, and those often are the notes that he hit with his little noises that he makes between phrases. He'll just throw in a really high note and then get back to the melody, which is usually at the top end of the male tenor range, but it just shows you naturally where his voice sits when talking was really high. So here's where the fun starts, because we're going to jump into Michael's voice, age 11, to see where it sat when he was talking, because we're going to be having a look at Who's Loving You, and he talks at the beginning of this, so let's have a listen.
I want to tell you a story about a girl I met at school one day during sandbox.
Interestingly, he's only a tone when he says sandbox and goes down there. Bad impression there. That was a more recent age Michael. But anyway, going down here, you can see the A-sharp 3. So yeah, just 2 notes. If we could go down just 1 note here, the A3, and then that would be the A flat, which is the same as the G-sharp 3. So he's hitting the same notes in his talking voice when he was 11 that he does when he's 36. But he does sit naturally a lot higher. Let's get back into it.
And we toasted our love during milk break.
Yeah, so generally a G4. So he does have about an octave in his talking voice to which it has come down when he's aged. And this is something that a lot of people, when they're talking about Michael Jackson and they say, oh, he had hormone injections or something in order to keep his voice at that range, this shows that, like most guys, his voice decreased by an octave as he aged, but he just had a really high voice in the first place. So it did come down, but was still then naturally high.
I gave him my cookies. So we fell out during finger pain. So one day, and that was Monday, and I stepped up to her and I said, when I had you.
I'm just going to jump in here, because when Michael gets into singing, I mean, it's just a great voice listening to this 11-year-old sing, but what I want to put the attention on and draw your attention to is his vibrato, because this is the thing that changed as he aged. So here, look at how wide this vibrato is and the distance between his peaks of vibrato and the waves of vibrato. It is quite wide. So I've just put on screen the vocal waves from You Are Not Alone, which was when Michael was 36, and this white line or the grey line is from that, so age 36. And look at the vibrato, the speed of it, but also how wide it is, or should I say it isn't. So this was when he was 11 and this was when he was 36. So there's been a dramatic change in his vibrato as he aged, but having seen videos of him being interviewed, he said that when he was 11 and when he just started singing, he never thought about how to do it, he just did it. He was just a natural singer. So, I mean, that must be great to not have to try and practice or get your vocal cords to do what you want them to. They just do what you want them to. So, he had that as a kid, and this means that his vibrato was natural. He wasn't trying to apply this as a technique. So when he was younger, he had a slower, wider vibrato, and then as he aged, he wouldn't have worked at making it faster and covering less pitch. It's just naturally happened as he's got older. So it then turned into this faster vibrato that actually, in parts, is a combination of vibrato and tremolo. But let's listen to a bit more, age 11.
Had you, I treated you bad and wrong, my dear, and good sin.
And again, look at how much pitch we're covering with the vibrato. We've got 4 semitones here. Actually, a little bit more you can add on to that. So really wide vibrato here.
And she went away.
And even there, it's amazing. His technical ability at the age of 11 was just insane because he's just doing it naturally. But the way that he flips into this head voice configuration as an 11-year-old, just pitch perfect with the control to add that vibrato as well. It's just on a totally different level. So you can see how he turned into the superstar that he was, because he already had a perfect voice when he started, let alone then having the drive to write songs and dance and take the dancing side of it to such a different level compared with other artists at the time. He already had this perfect voice with perfect technique. So now let's check out You Are Not Alone, age 36.
Another day is gone, I'm still all alone. How could this be? You're not here with me.
And something that I'm going to point out straight away, which you would never know, and I bet nobody's ever said this about Michael Jackson's voice. The only reason we can see this is because of the pitch monitoring software. Michael Jackson, with his older voice, used to vibrato and then go sharp with vibrato. So here, let me just point out what's going on. Sometimes he will keep it dead straight, but the amount of times that he ascends with vibrato is amazing to see, and that's how his voice was so unique. But just to point it out, when we go back to the beginning, having a look here again, we've got this tighter vibrato here, but we start on this B3, and if we drew a line from the beginning of these vocal waves to the end, you'll see that it goes up. It ascends to the B3, and that's during the vibrato, these wobbles, the waves that we can see. So, as we go to the next note, here, again, tighter vibrato, but now even more dramatic going up. He almost goes halfway between the B and the C with his vibrato. So we then go a little bit further on and take a look at this here. Hits the E4 dead on, vibratos up to almost the F4. And this is amazing to see. What I love about looking at great vocalists' vocal waves through the pitch monitoring software is it will always show you something that you never knew they did, and that's how they sounded unique. That's how you knew it was Michael Jackson when you heard his voice, because he was doing this. Obviously, he's not doing it intentionally, but this shows you all of the subconscious muscle memory, all of the movements that the vocal cords make that are natural but are distinctive, and this just shows them for what they are so accurately. And it's great. As we look through this, we can see that again here the next one started dead on and we're rising, so he's pretty much doing it most of the time. But let's jump into it, listen to a bit more.
How could this be? You're not here with me. You never said goodbye. Someone tell me why.
And there we did have one note that was held pretty much on the B3. Then the next one we just rise up a little bit and then descend.
Did you have to go?
And then again ascending.
Leave my world so cold.
And when we're talking about Michael Jackson, we've already seen how good he was when he was 11 years of age, so we're not going to be talking about pitch accuracy because he's pretty much bang on the whole time. Slightly flat here, but this is what you get with great singers. They won't always be hitting those lines because they're not auto-tuned, they are singing naturally. The other thing about this song, You Are Not Alone, is that there's keys being played the whole way through, and in the chorus, probably more than that, they mirror the notes and the melody of that lead vocal. So the pitch monitoring software is picking out, actually it's the voice isolating software that's picked out the exact same note as the keys. So it'll be dead on the line, even though technically Michael's voice wouldn't be dead on the line because it's not auto-tuned, but it's picked up that little bit of keys, so therefore put it straight on the line. But just to explain that before we go on.
Every day I sit and ask myself, how did I slip away? Something whispers in my ear and says, you're not alone.
And you can hear it coming in there, but we still got Michael's voice just being a little bit flat again.
I am here with you. Though you're far away, I am here to stay. You're not alone.
And when we're looking at this again, thinking back to when he was 11, where, here again, going up at the end, but we had, 4/4 semitones of vibrato. So it means that on this B3, he would have been hitting the C4 and getting up close towards that C sharp 4, and he would have been covering so much wider pitch with the vibrato when he was 11. The other thing to listen out for is that mix of tremolo and vibrato, like I said. So when he's hitting these notes going, ha, ha, he's got air, ha, but there's a little bit of vibrato in there. So tremolo by itself is going, ha, 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 and like breathing the note, and vibrato is going, ah, 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 and you're just waving the pitch. And putting those together, you go, ah, ah. So it's a combination of both, which is really difficult to do as well. Well, Michael does it naturally, but it's difficult to do when you're not a natural singer, but then doing it so that it sounds good. Again, he's just got this technique where it's the emotion that he's putting into the vocal. His vocal cords automatically make the adjustments for his expression. He's not trying to do this with techniques because he can't do it. It's the exact opposite of everyone who learns to sing is trying to do this, like me, going ha ha, and trying to blend techniques together rather than just being able to sing it naturally and think, oh, I want this kind of sound, oh, I can do it. With Michael, he's definitely got a lot more contemporary vibrato as he's aged. I don't think it's something that he's done intentionally, but it might be the fact that as he aged, he was now free to sing how he wanted to, rather than, I'm sure, when he was younger, his dad would have taught him how to sing or should I say, shown him how to sing in the kind of vibrato he wanted, whereas Michael, then, when he aged, he took on this vibrato that was different. It didn't cover as much pitch. It wasn't as dramatic. It was more his true voice, his authentic voice, because he could just sing how he now wanted to.
Every day I say and ask myself, how did I slip away? Some whispers in my ear and says that you're not alone.
And just speaking from a pitch perspective, as we go back, we had, I think, yeah, the E4, the F sharp 4. So we've got notes. If we go back to our piano here, the F sharp 4 is here. So getting up towards the top end of that male tenor range. But if we're listening to the notes when Michael's singing them,
every day I say and ask myself,
it doesn't sound high for his voice. It's not like he's straining. This is still a really light vocal sound that he's going for, and it has that conversational quality to it because it mirrors his talking voice so closely. And I mean, we all know that he could take his voice miles higher than this, but it's because of that natural voice that he had, just sitting a lot higher than normal. I've just moved it towards the end of the song now so we can have a listen to Michael's voice when he's starting to push into that chest voice. And when he was older, he had that rasp at the top of his voice that he could lean into as well. And I know that if you have seen the This Is It footage or the rehearsal for that tour that sadly never took place, that when he was rehearsing, he would not do this because obviously he's pushing his vocal in chest voice and wanting to not do his voice in, or at least save his voice as much as possible for main performances rather than rehearsals in that footage.
far away, I'm here to stay, but you are always alone in my heart.
Okay, so we've got this A sharp 4 where Michael can lean into it, but again, if we're thinking about his talking voice being the G sharp 3, the G sharp 4 is just 2 notes underneath this, so it's why he can really lean into this, because it's not super high for his voice, but it just sounds great because he has that ability. For most guys, hitting this with this much authority would be an almost impossibility, because they'd be either having to lighten up to a head voice sound, or if they were doing this, they might be straining, damaging their vocal cords if they didn't have good technique or were using too much air. But Michael just got a great sound up here, and he could actually take this, I'm sure, up to B4, C5, maybe D5 and higher with this same kind of authority.
Always in my heart, but you are not alone, not alone. Oh, you're not alone, you are not alone. Say it again, you're not alone, you are not alone.
And you can hear there, again, just leaning into it at the top.
Not alone, not alone.
And there, another perfect example, right on cue. Age 11, he had a totally different sound to his voice because of the vibrato. The range was obviously higher, but as he aged, his voice dropped a lot less than most people's voices would drop, because he had a high voice as a kid anyway, comparatively. So it meant that he was able to have this kind of range in his voice naturally. He wasn't having to strain to hit notes that most guys would have to strain to hit. And then once he did start to really push his vocal and hit those notes that would be a strain for his voice, we're talking about those C5s and D5s, so way up there in the countertenor range. But really interesting to see his vibrato, the way that he has this natural tendency just to increase with pitch as he applies that vibrato. But thank you guys so much for requesting this video, and it is one of those more specific ones, but let me know what you guys think. As always, keep those requests coming in the comments section below. If you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!